Hey, welcome to Crossroads. First off, folks, some very, very big news. My new documentary on the border crisis is now officially announced. It's going to be coming out May 9th. May 9th is the new documentary, very soon actually. It's called Weapons of Mass Migration, and in it I'm going to be exposing how the United States and the United Nations are working hand in hand to facilitate mass migration into the United States. It's being weaponized, in my opinion, to destroy the United States. It's against what's called the unipolar world order. And now that's going to be out on May 9th on epochtv.com. Again, epochtv.com. I'm very excited to see you all, have you all see it. We put a lot of work into this, so stay tuned for the rest of the show. I'll be showing you the trailer for the new documentary pretty soon. So now first I'll go into some of the stories. Now look, you might remember that in the 2016 elections, a lot of, let's say, unhappy voters pointed out that Hillary Clinton actually won the popular vote. That's what they said, right? Now, had the votes been counted and we just went by the popular vote, they were claiming that Hillary Clinton would have been president of the United States. But you know, since we have the Electoral College in this country, which gives a set number of votes to each state, Donald Trump won the Electoral College, and in 2016, Donald J. Trump became president, despite the popular vote, right? But that conflict between the popular vote and the Electoral College system, that did not just fade into history. There have been a lot of ongoing movements pushing to enact a popular vote system in the United States. And this may be further along than most of you realize. Already, as we're speaking right now in the United States, 17 U.S. states and Washington, D.C. are currently on board with dropping the normal use of the Electoral College for a popular vote. And they have a bit of a loophole they found with it to make it so they have to totally get rid of it. Let me explain. ABC News is saying after much public debate, a Maine law has brought the country closer to having the popular vote determine the winner of national presidential elections, but it's unlikely that will happen before November or even at all, they're claiming. It notes further in, the movement has now gathered pledges from 17 states and Washington, D.C., accounting for a total of 209 electoral votes, a good chunk of them actually. It notes that the movement seeks to change the way a president is chosen without a constitutional amendment, meaning because of the loophole they found, they don't need to go through the process you would have to go through otherwise if you wanted to overturn the Electoral College. They note that experts say it's unclear what happens when enough states have signed on to this because they have 17 already and they're trying to get more. They note, though, that this would not probably happen before the 2024 elections. Now, this is what it's called. It's called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And they said it seeks to guarantee that the candidate who receives the most popular votes in all 50 states and the District of Columbia wins the presidency, meaning the normal system of the Electoral College is out. It notes that when there are enough states pledging their popular votes to meet the 270 Electoral College vote threshold, remember they're almost there, they say all the votes in those states will be added up to a national count that determines the winner of the election. The National Popular Vote Interstate Compact says that it will give each vote equal weight regardless of where a voter lives. Now, in it, it notes that 5 of the 46 presidents who came into office lost the popular vote, including, they say, Donald Trump recently in 2016. It notes the compact argues that not every vote is equal under the current system because, again, we have the Electoral College and they want more pure democracy. Now, as you would imagine, there's a lot of different takes on this. Some people are pointing out that it would represent a more pure form of democracy, more of a direct democracy, actually. It would basically mean that votes would be more attributed to individuals rather than to states, because the current system of elections in the U.S. is made to give state representation in, of course, the federal government. And rather than have the state representation, a popular vote would be more the voters having that role. And it would kind of undermine, to an extent, the normal system of state rights, right? But it would also represent a serious shift in the nature of the American Union, which, we're a federal government that joins together 50 different states. Every state, if you were to compare it to another nation on earth, actually has a system of government, even a military, its own governor. Every state in the U.S. is basically a country joined together into, again, a union of states, which is the United States of America, right? That's what we call it, the United States. Now, the purpose of the Electoral College in its original use was to make sure that the interests of each state are represented by the federal government, to avoid a scenario where a handful of states, like, it would mainly be California and New York, would dictate the direction of the entire country. And of course, one of the concerns raised by the smaller states was, why would we join the union if we don't get represented? The Electoral College was a way to give incentive to states to actually join the American Federation of States, right, the union, while not having the risk of smaller states losing their representation to larger states, because why would they want to join otherwise? Now, right now, a lot of focus is on Nebraska and Maine, and there's a reason for this. The states, these ones, it's another issue with the Electoral College, but these states have a split vote system. Nebraska, for example, gets 5 out of the 538 Electoral College votes, but it, alongside Maine, the only two states that do this, they actually award their votes differently than the rest of the country. Instead of having a so-called winner-take-all system, the way that the normal Electoral College works, these states award an Electoral College vote for each congressional district and then 2 votes to the state winner, at least in Nebraska. The Trump team actually for 2024 has been trying to get Nebraska to change this, to adopt the same winner-take-all system as the rest of the country. But so far, Nebraska is not totally budging. And if they do change, the Democrats in Maine are saying they'll adopt the same winner-takes-all rule so that any benefit Trump would get by changing that system in Nebraska would be undermined and basically nullified by changes that would happen in Maine. Now, ironically, though, that type of pressure is also bringing proposed changes to the Electoral College even more into focus. Because, ironically, what Trump is doing in Nebraska and Maine, mainly Nebraska, is he's actually encouraging them to change their system of the Electoral College to bring it in line with the way the rest of the country works. But, of course, the other side, the Democrats, are using that to say, well, if you can change the Electoral College, why can't we, basically? I'll be talking about this more, though, after a quick word from our sponsor.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low-price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Hey, welcome back. There's a push taking place at the state level, forming a union of states, to end the current form of the Electoral College in national elections and to replace it instead with a popular vote. But other changes to the Electoral College are actually already in place. Now, you might remember that Congress changed the way that it handles Electoral College votes as well. This was actually fairly recently. This was part of the Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act of 2022, just a couple years ago. And here's what happened. When Electoral College votes are cast by states, normally you have the potential issue of dueling electors. Remember, we talked about this yesterday, where, again, they're trying to make that illegal. You have the issue of faithless electors. Like, there's a Democrat campaign in 2016 to get, again, Electoral College members to become faithless electors, to vote against Donald Trump, basically, even though they were nominated to vote Republican. And you also have the role of vice president, to count the Electoral College votes before Congress, which establishes, of course, the new president. And they already made some changes to this process. Let me show you how this went down. This is the National Conference of State Legislatures on this issue last year. And it says days before the end of the 117th Congress, an omnibus appropriations bill was signed by President Joe Biden. Included in that 4,000-page spending law, it was a spending law, but they stuffed this into it, was the Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act of 2022, or the ECRA. And it says it hammered out by lawmakers, including Senators Joe Manchin and Susan Collins, again, Republican and Democrat. This bipartisan legislation, they say, is intended to provide better guardrails to govern how presidential elections results get from the states to the Electoral College process and then to Congress, and how Congress handles them once there. And notes that according to many, the Electoral College Count Act of 1887 was overdue for an overhaul because it did not offer clear guidance on counting Electoral College votes or how to resolve possible disputes. I should note briefly that they're acknowledging here that, again, the way that the Electoral College rules were established did not clearly define some of the different processes, meaning, of course, that some of the narratives that Trump tried overthrowing that process is debunked by the very nature of the vague language, which, again, they had to clarify with an act signed by Biden after the elections, right? But back on this, it says the new law mainly addresses what Congress does after electors are sent forward from the states. It creates a new threshold for members of object to a state of electors, 1/5 of the members of both the House and Senate, identifies the role of the vice president as solely ministerial, because remember that when Mike Pence was counting the Electoral College votes, he was arguing he did not have the legal right to, maybe question states that had ongoing lawsuits or ongoing investigations into fraud. And he said he did not have the legal right to, for example, decide to read the dueling electors over the other electors. And because of that, again, which would, under the Constitution, normally send that to a House vote based on delegations, under which Trump probably would have won the elections, given the split of the House at the time. And of course, it's based on state representation, not purely House seats, meaning, again, Republicans would have more representation. They had to actually change this in order to say that you can't do that. The thing that Pence said he couldn't do, they had to change the law to make it so that he actually could not have. But this is what it does. It says it identifies the role of the vice president as solely ministerial and clarifies that Congress must defer to slates as determined by the states. Briefly on this, for Republicans and Trump, this actually might work out better for 2024 because it means that, like Kamala Harris as vice president can't just choose to not read Electoral College votes. To be honest, at least for the 2024 elections, this may actually benefit Republicans even more, or at least closes the possible loophole that could come up through that, right? But it notes that it also addresses the state side of the equation. It codifies that the executive of each state sends forward the state slate of electors. The law indicates that in this context, the executive is usually a governor. Briefly on that as well, remember there was a conflict on who gets to determine who is the legal person who gets to send forward the Electoral College voters. Again, during the 2020 elections, there was a debate over whether it's the governor or the state legislatures, the local state Congress, basically. And of course, if you go by the Constitution, I had believed, as did many, that the state legislatures were the ones, right? The state legislature is what gets to decide that. And of course, in many states, the dueling electors were put forward by the state legislature, whereas the state governors had their own Electoral College voters. And that's what caused a lot of the conflict, of course, with the dueling electors in 2020. You had the governor ones and you had the state legislature ones. And Pence said that he had to choose which one to count. He said he didn't have the legal right to go for the dueling electors, right? But what this did was essentially codified this. So now under this new act, it's the governor who decides, and the vice president does not have the right to choose to read or not read, and so on. It adds, though, that if state law in effect prior to the election explicitly identifies another officer, such as the Secretary of State, that works as well, meaning they have to do it ahead of time. The law simply requires a certainty before the election. They have to say beforehand who's the legitimate authority for this. It says additionally, it requires some kind of security feature on the certificate of ascertainment, the official document identifying a state's appointed electors, suggesting they didn't have this before. Again, as determined by the state before the election. The goal, they say, is to be sure that the right slate, and only that slate, is transmitted. No more dueling electors because of this. It says the law also clarifies that electors shall be appointed in accordance with the laws of the state enacted prior to election day. A state cannot change the rules after the voting ends. Now, on this, and back to the idea of a popular vote, though, because, again, as I've mentioned, Trump is challenging the two states that don't follow the normal procedure of the Electoral College, right? They have a split vote system, Nebraska and Maine. Trump is challenging that. Democrats, there's a campaign right now, again, under this confederation of states, basically, where they're trying to make a popular vote. And of course, as I discussed, there was also the Biden administration and what was actually a bipartisan legislation that clarified, they say, the nature of how votes are counted and of how electors are sent forward. Some of the possible loopholes in the election were closed because of that. And now things like dueling electors, things like the vice president being able to overturn an election, none of that is anymore possible. But again, back to the idea of a popular vote. The issue is not necessarily partisan. It's actually not just Democrats or Republicans, at least not if you go by polling from last year. This is Newsweek from September of 2023, and they said this: a growing number of Republican voters, they claimed at least, want presidential elections decided by popular vote rather than the Electoral College system, according to a poll, even though that would favor Democrat candidates in recent history. They say that a Pew Research Center's survey found that nearly 2/3 of U.S. adults, 65%, say the way the president is elected should be based on who receives the most votes overall nationally, with 33% believing it should remain as who wins the Electoral College count. They're suggesting that only 33% of Americans want the Electoral College as it currently is. And they say as well, the poll also shows that just over half of Republican voters, 52%, want to keep the Electoral College system. However, the amount of GOP voters who want to switch to the popular vote currently stands at 47% and has been increasing steadily for years. Now look, that said, I don't fully trust polls. I tend to think that they get things wrong often, and I tend to think there's a lot of bias that is possible. I'm not accusing this one, but there's a lot of possible bias in terms of how you conduct a poll. I tend to not fully believe them, but they do have an impact on the decisions that get made in this country. They actually do have tangible interest when it comes to political strategy. If the 2024 elections go the same as the 2016 elections, it's likely that a popular vote would actually harm Republicans more than Democrats, actually even further than that. And remember as well, in the context of the 2020 elections, a lot of Republicans believe that Trump actually did win the popular vote. Take it for what you will. But again, they believe that there were other anomalies, let's say, that changed that. If we go by USA Today, though, Republicans haven't technically won the popular vote since George W. Bush, which was back in 2004. USA Today notes that Bush won 50.7% of the popular vote in the 2004 presidential elections, according to the Federal Election Commission, the agency responsible for enforcing campaign finance regulations. They note that when Bush left office in 2009 after serving 2 terms, that means the last Republican presidential candidate to win the popular vote left office 14 years ago. Now that sounds like a long time, but practically speaking, what that really means is that, Barack Obama won the popular vote, and then they claim Hillary Clinton won the popular vote in 2016, despite Trump winning the Electoral College at the time. And so, take it for what you will. It's not as extreme as it sounds. That's 2 elections, basically. But this is being predicted as a trend as well for the 2024 elections, which is important, again, as we said, when it comes to strategy and politics and maybe what they're trying to change to ensure victory. Business Insider notes that new polling predicts former President Donald Trump will lose the popular vote in 2024 in the presidential election to Joe Biden, but they're saying that Trump would probably win the Electoral College by a significant margin. Now remember, this has changed a bit. This is from last year, but again, this is based on the studies and polling they've done, which they don't update too often. They note that between mid-August to the beginning of November, Stack Data Strategy interviewed more than 15,000 registered U.S. voters in order to forecast the upcoming election. And they say the results released on Monday at the time show Trump flipping 4 states in 2024 that were crucial to Biden's 2020 victory: Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. They're saying Trump is probably going to win those swing states, right? The 4 states ultimately equate to 56 electoral votes, more than enough to push Trump over the 270 mark to win back the White House. And they note that if Stack Data Strategy's predictions are accurate, the election would mark a 3rd time since 2000 that a president won the election without winning the popular vote. Suggesting again that unless they change the Electoral College, Trump might win. But here's the wild card in it. In that same light, the Electoral College is seen by some Democrats as one of the biggest things standing in their way of victory for 2024. But the other side of it is there's a big concern with RFK Jr., because they're saying that RFK Jr. might actually get a lot more votes in the swing states. Remember, the reason swing states are swing states is because they don't really lean Republican or Democrat. You have more independent voters. That's the challenge of swing states. And if you have a very popular independent candidate based on historical polling and election results, the swing states tend to vote a lot for independents. Remember Ross Perot and stuff? The swing states might actually go for an independent, meaning that the popular vote will be sucked away from whichever candidate the swing states are pulling votes from. RFK Jr. expected to pull more votes from Democrats, meaning that even with a popular vote, RFK Jr. might throw a big fat wrench in that plan, right? Politico notes in 2023, the Electoral College is a big factor in a third-party nightmare for Democrats. And they say battleground states may actually be the least likely places for non-major party candidates to draw support. In other words, again, like Arizona and Georgia and Pennsylvania, right? But look, as I mentioned a bit ago, even if we can't fully go by polls, right? I show you some polls. I don't fully believe polls. The data is used to inform politics. A lot of political strategy is based on them, even if they're not fully reliable. And that large and growing national movement we discussed earlier that already has 17 states and Washington, D.C., talking about switching to a popular vote, has actually been gaining steam from this data. Because again, they're saying that Biden is probably going to lose the popular or win the popular vote, but lose the, again, Electoral College. And unless they change the Electoral College, they might not win. But as I mentioned earlier, the movement behind this is part of the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. That's the official name for it. Let me show you some details on that. This is when Minnesota joined it last year. And they were the 16th state saying they will participate. One more has joined since then. The Democracy Docket said in June of 2023 that last month at the time, Minnesota brought the U.S. one step closer to reforming the Electoral College and ushering in a national popular vote for president. How? By passing a little-known legislative provision called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Again, they're bypassing the very difficult process of changing the Electoral College rules by doing it through a different means. Let me explain. It says the compact is an ingenious workaround, loophole, to the frustrating reality that fully abolishing the Electoral College, they can't abolish it, requires a constitutional amendment. A non-starter in this political movement, because again, they can't do it from the state level. They can't just create a constitutional amendment and get rid of the Electoral College. So rather than get rid of the Electoral College by trying to alter the Constitution, they found another way to violate the Constitution. They say that instead of scrapping the Electoral College, the compact simply requires that participating states award all of their presidential electors to whichever candidate wins the most votes nationally, meaning the entire country. Whoever wins the national popular vote gets the electors from those states. Meaning, again, if there's a national election and, again, whoever wins, all the votes from those states go to that person. But they note that critically, the compact does not go into effect until states representing the majority of Electoral College votes. So they have to hit the 270 vote threshold and they have to sign on with that. Again, they're just over 200 currently, meaning they need probably a couple more states or a few more depending on how big the states are. They note that at that point, each state's law will kick into action and the winner of the popular vote will be guaranteed a presidential victory. Now, briefly on this loophole, remember the Electoral College is a process and a system laid out in the Constitution. As they mention, if you want to actually get rid of the Electoral College and move toward a popular vote, you have to amend the Constitution. And that's very difficult. The process for that is very, very difficult and very risky, in fact, because you would open up the Constitution to other possible changes, not only that. And so rather than do that, they're changing the state law on this, very similar to what's happening in Nebraska and Maine, where, again, they have a split vote system for the Electoral College. And they're not talking about, again, the state's part of this compact. They're not talking about getting rid of the Electoral College. What they're saying is that they will award their Electoral College votes based on a national, whoever is most popular, whoever gets the popular vote standard. So they're keeping the Electoral College votes, but awarding them based on popularity, popular vote, right? Now, notes further in, most of the pro-democracy states, I think they mean democracy rather than a republic, at this point are states controlled by Democrats. They say they've already joined the compact, and the remaining blue states are too small to contribute many electoral votes, suggesting again that even if they got all the Democrat states on board, they wouldn't have enough to reach that 270 threshold, meaning they don't think it's worthwhile, basically. And notes that leaves Electoral College reformers reliant on passing the compact in states at least partially governed by lawmakers hostile to democratic reform unless new leaders take over. They need to get control of more state legislatures and governors, right? They say that strategically then, the path to a national popular vote demands getting laser focused on election pro-democracy, direct democracy I mean, not republics, right? Lawmakers in state legislatures. They have to flip the states, in other words, and they said that would end the Electoral College as we know it. They said that this brings the end of the Electoral College as we know it within reach, according to them directly, right? Now, look, of course, we'll see how this plays out. Right now, even if these states do move forward to enact a popular vote, it might not be in place for 2024. As they note, they have to actually flip several states if they want to get enough Democrat states on board to actually do it. They don't have the ability to do it yet, even though they're actually pretty close to it. Now, we can expect to see a lot of challenges to this and probably a lot more debate as it gets closer. And there's, of course, the wild card that, depending on how things go, the polls are just not accurate, the polling data. And Trump could be like Bush not that long ago, and Trump may win the popular vote as well. Some people argue he won it in 2020, right? But again, we'll see. Even beyond the 2024 elections, though, we can't just think of this as a couple-year agenda and then the whole thing's off the table. The debates around the Electoral College are very likely going to still be there. And any change to that will represent a significant shift in how presidents are elected. They're talking about getting rid of one of the foundations of how we do elections in the U.S. And if they get rid of this, it is going to change our system of government. We'll be more of a direct democracy, at least when it comes to national elections. Now, on a related note, though, When it comes to the elections and the possible impact of third-party candidates, I mentioned RFK Jr., this could very well represent a reform within the Democrat Party. And this is the other thing Democrats are having to consider right now. It might not be in their favor to actually get rid of the Electoral College because RFK Jr. might actually split the votes in the swing states. I'll be talking about this more, though, and also how there are different factions within the Democrat Party who are kind of dividing the party right now over the Israel-Hamas war. That'll be only on EpochTV.com, though. So for those of you watching on YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble, come and join us on Epoch TV. That's our uncensored streaming platform dedicated to bringing you the truth. So come and join us. Not only will you get access to the rest of this show, but also big news. You'll get access to my new documentary about the border crisis. And I am right now officially announcing its release. So my documentary called Weapons of Mass Migration is going to be released on May 9th, only on EpochTV.com. And let me talk briefly about that. Now, folks, you might remember, it was like 2 or 3 years ago, I did a special feature investigating the border crisis. I went into Mexico, I went to the US-Mexico border, and what I found was essentially that the United Nations was working with the US government to run the border crisis. I exposed how the State Department is working with the IOM, International Organization for Migration, and they're facilitating mass migration into the US, that American tax dollars, I showed you their actual website and the documents on it, our tax dollars are paying for it. Now, to be honest, I was probably a bit too far ahead of the curve on that. A lot of people did not believe it, frankly. But recently, some reports have come out corroborating and confirming what I said. It is now more widely accepted that actually, yeah, the United Nations is running this. Our tax dollars are paying for it. But there's still a lot of unanswered questions. A lot of people still don't know what's going on, how it works, what the process is. And so my new documentary, it goes into this. I went down to Darien, right at the mouth of the Darien Gap in Panama. I got access to the migrant camps in Darien, which you normally cannot get into. We had some good contacts who helped us gain access. And we got video in the camps. I have video of the United Nations checkpoints. I have video of the registration processes of the United Nations. I have video of the bus systems and how what they do is they just load them onto buses, ship them north to Costa Rica. Costa Rica loads them on buses, ships them north. When they get to Mexico, they ship them north. The cartels only handle the border crossing, and from there they turn themselves into Customs Border Protection. Customs Border Protection takes them to what they call processing facilities alongside the Department of Homeland Security. They get them registered in the amnesty program, which is when they say they arrest them, that's actually what they're talking about. They just enroll them in the amnesty program. And again, they discard their IDs so they can defraud the process. They give them a free airplane ticket to anywhere they want to go in the country. They load them on buses and they drop them off on the streets of the USA. And I have the entire thing on video. I videotaped, I recorded each step of this process, and I'm going to show it to all of you. This is going to be a very important documentary. This documentary has the potential to change our debate on the mass migration crisis and what is really going on in this country. I will show you exactly what they're doing, exactly how the process works. I will show you the organizations behind it. I will show you the money behind it. I'll show you the systems to facilitate it. I will show you this on May 9th when this documentary comes out. I'm going to show you a quick trailer, though, of it before we get into this. But again, folks, this new documentary, Weapons of Mass Migration, is officially announced right here, right now. It's going to be coming out May 9th, only on EpochTV.com. So if you want to watch it, come and join us at EpochTV.com and please help us get the word out. Let me show you the official trailer.
An unrelenting stream of immigration. Non-stop.
According to statistics, around 7.2 million illegal immigrants entered the United States under President Joe Biden alone. They have United Nations facilities here. And the people pushing this are leading people to their deaths.
To what extent is the United Nations facilitating the border crisis?
They're throwing rocks!
They're being overridden by international powers.
We are not authorized to talk.
It is a humanitarian business now.
And they said, oh yeah, these are the debit cards. We're giving these debit cards to the immigrants.
Why all the cloak and dagger? Why are we being so stealthy about this?
Some of these people have gone on record and publicly talked about this, people close to Barack Obama.
It puts 12 million people on the path to citizenship and eventually voters.
I've been researching, of course, what's happening, but I want to know why it's happening.
We'll see chaos on a global scale until America is extinguished and the power shifts completely to the east.